This video is brought to you by Skillshare. This little flying wing is named Instability, and I'm pretty sure you can spot the reason why. It doesn't fly great yet as is, but this idea has really taken hold in my mind, and I won't give up on it easily. Here's why. I always thought the major benefit of having an aircraft so unstable that it couldn't fly without a computer was maneuverability. And when you have a budget of billions and national security is on the line, it makes sense to go all out and get every last ounce of performance. Also, I was never that into aerobatics, where such a setup could really do wonders. Efficiency was sometimes mentioned, but I often wondered if having flight surfaces in constant movement would offset marginally better airfoils, especially since getting it to work well would take a ton of effort. Thus, the idea never gained too much traction with me, until one day I unsuspectingly opened a thread on the Home-Built Airplanes forum called Today's Sketch, and wow was I about to get a mental concept restructuring, courtesy of Adam Berger. The sketch was cool, another home-built flying wing similar to others before it, or so I thought at first glance. But this was going to have the center of gravity behind the neutral point. It would be unflyable without computer stabilization. My initial thought was that it was a cool technical challenge without much reward. Then I read the punchline. By having the center of gravity behind the neutral point, this flying wing would actually push down on the elevons, much like flaps, when taking off and landing, and thus the flying wing would actually have much more lift at low speed than a typical flying wing. Mind blown. Why? Because most aircraft have wing size to takeoff and landing requirements, not to cruise where the aircraft spends the majority of its time. Almost all aircraft wings are larger than they would need to be for their most efficient cruising speed. If I can now create a smaller wing and still land at the desired speed, my cruise drag goes down. The wing could potentially be 25% smaller than normal. We have some wrinkles in the foam in the nose. There's a little bit of structural flexing back here. And that is it. I anticipated a few crashes in the tuning process and wanted to build this plane especially tough. Normally I don't cover builds in the videos as there are some fairly in-depth tutorials on the channel, but I'm guessing a few of you are curious as to how this plane is completely structurally and aerodynamically intact at this point. So I'll take a minute and recap how I built this. If you have any questions, definitely check out the tutorials I posted when the channel started. For aircraft with an uncertain or rough duty future, I generally start with 1.9 pound expanded polypropylene foam, or EPP for short. If I am the one cutting the foam cores, the foam sheet gets run through the spec CNC hot wire cutter. The cores and beds are then positioned and tacked together with 3M90. A spar channel is cut with a razor and cleaned out with sandpaper. In this case I used Gorilla Glue to secure a 4x1mm carbon strip top and bottom. I used paint Kansas weights to keep everything straight while the Gorilla Glue cured. Pockets were cut for some KST digital servos and then potted with plumber's goop and allowed to cure. Since the servos are wrapped once in electrical tape, replacing them is fairly easy if needed. The elevons are solid balsa and attached with kicker and medium CA glue to the cores. They are then tediously cut back to match the original foil as best as possible. Definitely not molded airframe quality here. A mixture of lightweight spackle, goop, and propyl acetate is used to prepare the wing cores for covering. Each layer is allowed to cure and then sanded back. 1.7 ounce plain weave Kevlar is marked to cover one wing half at a time. The cloth is cut so that the fibers cross the main spar at a 45-degree angle. This gives a lot of torsional strength to the wing. Before that is adhered to the wing, a small piece of Kevlar is applied to the wingtip with contact spray where the main fabric will be split to allow it to conform to the wingtip. The fabric is attached to the wing with goop thinned in propyl acetate. An iron set to 130 degrees Celsius is used to evaporate the solvent and remove excess adhesive while adhering the fabric to the core. This process does not work well without the iron. Super thin CA is used to attach the Kevlar to the balsa portion of the wing. The goop mixture is insufficient for this task. A veil of 0.75 ounce fiberglass goes over the Kevlar with the goop and propyl acetate mixture. This allows for a much nicer finish on the aircraft later. I needed a fuselage to get the weight far enough forward to demonstrate a normal flying wing configuration before moving the weight back to an unstable configuration. I really underestimated how long the nose would need to be as the balsa elevons were really heavy. Not only is balsa wood getting very expensive, the weight is also going up dramatically as most of the high-quality wood is going into windmills. I ended up adding about 8 ounces of lead shot to get the plane to balance, which is a lot on a 32-ounce airplane. Paint is mandatory on all my aircraft. If they don't look decent, they won't fly decent. The world is a lot like this airplane right now, currently unstable and not handling it well. I often listen to people doing far more than myself, and they universally say the best investment you can make in times like these is in your abilities. That is why I'm happy to talk to you about this video sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online community where one can go to level up on virtually any skill and improve their chances of coming out smiling in these uncertain times.
I love it when a video is sponsored by a company I am already supporting because I already valued what they had to offer. I sometimes post tech-related things on YouTube, so it would be almost impossible not to know who Marques Brownlee is, the king of tech himself. I was blown away by the fact that Skillshare offered a course by the man himself, and so I paid for the course called YouTube Success: Script, Shoot, and Edit with MKBHD. I put to use his thousands of hours of knowledge every day to improve my channel. That is something I wanted to learn, but what would you want to learn to have a more impactful journey this year? I'd recommend heading over to Skillshare.com sometime and exploring their offerings. They may have exactly what you need to get to where you want to go. The first 1,000 people to use the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Now, back to the video. To get the elevons working, I took a sharp razor and cut through the top skin and balsa, being careful not to cut through the bottom skin as that would be my hinge. Bringing this project home was a Maytech autopilot running the latest Artiplane software. It seemed like a good idea to use an autopilot with an H7 processor, as that would allow me to run the highest stabilization frequencies possible, up to 400 loops per second. For the first flight, I set this up like a typical aircraft. The black line represents the center of gravity, and it is in front of the neutral point, which is the red dot. To counteract the weight being centered in front of the neutral point, we raise the elevons to pull the nose back up. This is a stable system. That is without stabilization. That is without the computer in the loop. So it feels a little rough as expected since this is not a flying wing airfoil, but it's working.
What is it, a Zaggy?
Hi, puppy!
That's doing all right, Damon. What's up with you? Okay. I'm a little busy, but I'm on.
Okay, so I moved the battery from the nose and I had to move it back to where the unstable position is. Before I moved the battery, the plane balanced here on the black line, and the neutral point was the neutral aerodynamic center of the aircraft. So now that I've moved the battery back and I've taken out some nose weight, the weight is back here behind the neutral point, okay? So now it's tail heavy and I have a lot of reflex in here, so when I throw it, it's just gonna flip over on its back. See how bulletproof my planes are.
Oh!
That crash knocked the nose off as it was not Kevlar reinforced, but I didn't need that long nose anymore, so it was time to modify it. I put on a new and shorter nose without all the lead weight in it and prepared the body for fabric, as this is when the crashing was anticipated. There was some fiberglass laying around the shop that actually draped better than the plain weave Kevlar I used on the wings, so I tried that on the fuselage and it worked out really well actually. Well enough that I'm trying it out on an entire plane being fabricated at the moment. With the aircraft center of gravity further to the rear and prepped to get wrecked, it was back to the field.
So here's the neutral point in red, around which all the aerodynamic forces are balanced. Last time we had the center of gravity up here in front of the neutral point, and that's normal, that's a stable configuration. Now we've moved it all the way back here. I've never done that, and I don't know if the autopilot can handle that, but we changed the trim so the elevons here are much further down, like a normal aircraft, not like a flying wing. Give this a 20% chance that it works right off the bat. So I'm going to try a different stabilized mode.
Artiplane is extremely powerful, and one of the side effects of that is that it is very nuanced. I'm counting on that nuance to get this system working, but without knowing all the particulars of the system, all I could really do on this outing was play with the center of gravity and trim, which definitely helped but was nowhere close to the final objective.
Ooh, nice.
The first thing I wanted to check out was how many times a second the autopilot was updating itself and how many times the servos were updating. These variables turned out to be changeable. The servos were updating 50 times a second but can do 400, so I maxed that out. The autopilot was updating at 300 Hz, or 300 times a second, so I bumped that up to 400 as well and went back out to fly and find out if those changes were going to be effective. I used an empty area next to the normal field as the paraglider pilots were using it due to some unusually fine weather conditions. The ground was a bit less forgiving and the changes did not make a perceivable difference, so that afternoon turned into more of a durability test.
Aerodynamic is very powerful and effective. It also has a talented core of developers who have begun steering me towards a more methodical approach to getting this project to work. This concept is highly intriguing to me, and I believe I have the right hardware, software, and support to pull this off. The benefits that can be reaped when working properly are too hard to ignore. Join me next time for the conclusion of this project. And if you enjoyed this video, you may also enjoy one of these videos on the left of the screen.